Washington loves a political wedding, and Saturday night it got one when 23-year-old vice presidential daughter Corinna Gore married New York Dr. Andrew Schiff at the National Cathedral, the same majestic structure where 27 years ago her parents, Al and Tipper, were also married.
That's a mixed marriage. Her parents, of course, are Democrats. His parents are Republicans. But he seems to have strayed from the family partisan line, and he's a Democrat. So, but they all seem to be thrilled that this marriage is happening.
When Senator John Kennedy married Jacqueline Bouvier in 1953, onlookers crowded the streets of Newport, Rhode Island to catch a glimpse. It was also a big story when LBJ's daughter Linda married future Senator Chuck Robb in a White House ceremony in 1967. And when Tricia Nixon held her 1971 wedding to Edward Cox in the Rose Garden. The Gore-Schiff wedding has all the elements of a high-profile modern-day marriage. The wedding photographer was Dennis Reggie. He did the same duties for Carolyn Bassett's marriage to John Kennedy Jr. He's also Senator Ted Kennedy's brother-in-law. Popular designer Vera Wang created the bride's gown. Aretha Franklin, showbiz pal of both the Clintons and the Gores, entertained the guests. In 1992, Bill Clinton picked then Tennessee Senator Al Gore to be his running mate. Since then, eldest daughter Corinna has often been in the public eye, appearing with her father at numerous political events, juggling official family functions with work as a journalist. She'll enter Columbia Law School in the fall. Washington florists and caterers were busy Saturday bringing supplies to the well-guarded vice presidential residence for the wedding reception. Former Kennedy Social Secretary Letitia Baldridge had some advice for guests.
It's bad enough to be in an alcoholic haze at anyone's wedding, but if you're on the vice president's ground, that's United States government ground, the taxpayers own it. Don't mess it up by having over-imbibed.
Perhaps the most difficult part of planning this Washington wedding was keeping the guest list to 350 people and one raccoon. Not an easy task when your father is vice president of the United States. Rebecca Cooper, CNN, Washington. Earlier this week, Jack Kemp told CNN Financial News that it's only halftime in this election campaign. Kemp says it's not too late to rally the voters around a Dole bid to win back the White House. Rebecca Cooper, CNN, Dole headquarters in Washington. But in the competitive world of campaign consulting, how you play the game is not nearly as important as whether you win or lose. At the White House, Rebecca Cooper, CNN Financial News. While New Hampshire may be one of the smallest states in the nation, the voters here on Main Street know that in a presidential election year, when they talk about the candidates, the politicians, the press, and the pollsters listen. Rebecca Cooper, CNN Business News, Concord, New Hampshire.
I,
Power,
Clinton,
politics,
do solemnly
sex, and intrigue. Movie directors say the city of Washington is the perfect Hollywood setting. So when Tinseltown comes to the capital city, a number of Washingtonians get recruited as actors, consultants, even themselves. Journalist Bernard Kalb got his moment on the big screen playing Bernard Kalb.
I think certainly from the production point of view, you think if you thread the movie every 15 minutes with a real reporter, it might be able to sweep up the audience in the sense that something real is happening.
Movie studios go to great lengths to recruit Washingtonians who know how the city works. Former White House Social Secretary Lori Firestone was hired by director Rob Reiner to recreate the White House for the American president.
They spent over $7 million on the sets alone. And they built the East Room, the grand foyer, the cross hall. They did the upstairs. They did a child's bedroom. Very authentic.
You may know him as The Voice every night on CNN's Crossfire.
From Washington, Crossfire.
But actor Ted Sutton has been in a number of movies and television projects with a Washington theme.
One of the things you get to do as an actor in Washington, a lot of, is work as a Secret Service agent.
Congressman Gary Condon of California is often seen in Washington negotiating the budget. Blink and you might miss him in the movie Return of the Killer Tomato. But it's hard to miss Fred Thompson. Once a Watergate counsel, Thompson caught Hollywood's eye with a gritty, realistic style that landed him plenty of work as a character actor, including a turn as White House Chief of Staff in Clint Eastwood's In the Line of Fire. He then leveraged his fame into an engagement on one of the world's great stages, the U.S. Senate.
I also like to say sometimes that after a year and a half in Washington, I often long for the sincerity and realism of Hollywood.
But Thompson says movie studios don't only come to Washington for realism.
No, I think it's simply because that they can come to Washington and get a politician to act real cheap.
Studio sources say Washington is hardly the ideal location. City regulations, security, and high cost make the most powerful city in the world one of the most difficult cities in the world for filming. But industry sources say as long as Washington will always be in the movies will always be in Washington. At the White House, Rebecca Cooper, CNN Financial News. When the freshman Republicans came to Congress, they vowed to end wasteful Washington spending. But this year's spending bills show that freshman Republicans are now bringing home the bacon, adding special projects for their districts that weren't in the original spending bills. Listen to Congressman Dick Chrysler on government waste a year ago.
After forming a working group of freshman reformers and outside experts to study the validity of the Department of Commerce, we have found that the DOC should be dismantled.
But now that he's up for re-election, Chrysler got more than $1 million for a bus port in his district that the Department of Transportation didn't ask for. And freshman David
Last
McIntosh.
time is the president's not serious about negotiating for a balanced budget. As I said, we've passed a balanced budget, but he's failed to put one on the table.
But in the latest round of spending bills, McIntosh added $3 million for housing improvements in his Indiana district.
It's a blighted inner-city neighborhood, and the residents there were pointing out the different houses that they were going to rebuild with the funds for that. I took that information, which I'd gotten earlier to the committees, back and said, I can justify this. This isn't pork. This is real important spending.
Republican leaders, wanting to keep a majority in Congress, are pushing federal funds into the districts of the most vulnerable members. Freshman Andrea Seastrand got $3 million for electric buses in Santa Barbara. Republican freshman Michael Flanagan joined Democrat Dick Durbin to get $25 million for Chicago transit improvement. Freshman Linda Smith often tells the voters in her district that Congress still doesn't get it when it comes to cutting spending. But Smith did manage to get $1 million added to the transportation spending bill for a bus project in her district. Congressman J.D. Hayworth held a press conference last year to blast what he called federal welfare for lobbyists.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, evidence of your tax dollars at work, doing the wrong type of work, involved in the wrong activities, and something this Congress will change.
But this year, Hayworth got $20 million in federal funds for aviation radios built in his home state. Hayworth says the new radios are needed for aviation safety, but the Federal Aviation Administration disagreed. Republicans have made significant cuts in federal spending since they took control of Congress in 1994, but this year's spending bills show that even so-called deficit hawks spend your tax dollars on their constituents when it's time to go to the polls. Rebecca Cooper, CNN Financial News, Washington.
She won't be, I will be. She says she's going to try to stay up this year, though. Now, when the clock strikes midnight tonight, champagne and the liquor will flow, and 1997 will be greeted with a buzz and a bit of a blur for some.
But CNN's Rebecca Cooper reports there are some sober options, and a growing number of people are greeting the new year with lots of spirit, but no booze.
At the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Washington, party promoters are busy getting ready for a typical New Year's Eve extravaganza.
We have 2 live bands featuring Cayenne Soul and Otis Day and the Nights, DJ and dancing in the upstairs ballroom, 4.5-hour top shelf open bar.
But if you're more interested in dancing than drinking the night away, there are a number of ways to be in step this holiday season. One of the most popular, an event known as First Night International. Founded in Boston 20 years ago, there are now over 160 First Nights celebrated across the United States and Canada, each offering an array of live performances, food, and fireworks. The Washington area is host to 5 First Nights, from Annapolis, Maryland, to this one being set up in Alexandria, Virginia.
This was a way to give the artists some recognition, bring the community together, and take the emphasis off of alcohol.
Sober social events over the holidays are especially important for recovering alcoholics. A number of AA chapters sponsor dances. Addiction counselors caution family and friends to be sensitive to the needs of non-drinkers on New Year's.
A lot of recovering people will set themselves up and inadvertently find themselves in a situation where drinking's happening and may impulsively drink.
When the clock strikes midnight around the world on this New Year's Eve, champagne will still be flowing. But for millions of people wanting a non-alcoholic alternative, events like First Night are something to sing about.
Shake, 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 Sonora, shake your body now.
Rebecca Cooper, CNN, Washington.